Hey guys, tonight we are stepping into a world where the nights are long. The frost bites harder than your Wi-Fi bill, and survival isn't guaranteed. You're a medieval peasant, trudging through the mud of your village just as autumn tips into winter. The wind whistles down the thatched lanes, and your breath fogs in front of you like a tiny ghost that refuses to leave. And, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this without some clever tricks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first frost has fallen. You wake to find the fields silver-crusted. Every blade of grass stiff like tiny needles. Your bare toes complain loudly, but there's no one to listen. Already you sense that this season is going to test your bones. In summer, your days stretched out in warm light, filled with toil, but also with open skies and long evenings. Now the sun vanishes ridiculously early, like it hit snooze on humanity, and you're left fumbling in the dark by late afternoon. The darkness isn't just inconvenient, it's threatening. Every hour the frost deepens, the ground turns to stone, and water freezes in your bucket before you can even use it. Historians still argue whether the medieval climate was harsher than today's, but most agree that in Northern Europe especially, winter felt brutally long. Without insulation, without central heating, without the sacred gift of fleece pajamas, you face an elemental fight every single night. The first frosts aren't just a chill in the air. They're a warning shot from nature, a reminder that you'd better be ready, or you're about to become a very cold statistic. So what do? You start small. The crops are mostly pulled in: barley, oats, maybe a few turnips tucked away in a damp cellar. You pray to every saint you can think of that the harvest lasts until the thaw. Because let's be honest, starvation is just as deadly as frostbite. And medieval life loves giving you both as a 2-for-1 deal. The air smells of smoke now. Wood smoke seeping from the thatched roofs as your neighbors burn whatever they can find. Sticks, dried dung, broken tools, sometimes even furniture if things are desperate. You might laugh at burning a chair, but remember, when the choice is warmth or sitting in comfort, your backside can always meet the floor. There's a strange beauty to this season, though. The stillness of a frozen morning, the way frost glitters like powdered sugar across the fields. It almost lulls you into thinking this is some cozy postcard moment, until your fingertips go numb and you realize you're not sipping cocoa. You're hauling icy water from a half-frozen stream. You'd kill for cocoa, actually. But instead, you've got thin gruel and the vague hope that tomorrow won't be worse. One quirky tidbit. Some medieval villagers genuinely believed the first frost carried spirits of the dead, drifting down with the cold to test the living. You might whisper a charm, spitting into the frost so the dead don't sneak into your lungs with the next breath. Is it effective? Probably not. But when your night is pitch black and your candle stub has burned out, you'll try anything to keep the unseen at bay. The first frost also marks the beginning of early bedtimes. With no electric light, no glowing phone screen to scroll through, you're left with firelight or nothing. So you head to bed absurdly early, sometimes right after sunset. There's this eerie rhythm to life now. Wake in the dark, work in the gray light, collapse in the dark again. Scholars debate whether people split their sleep into two chunks, first sleep and second sleep, with an hour of wakefulness in between. Some say peasants whispered prayers or swapped gossip by the fire during that midnight interlude. Others doubt the poor had the luxury. Still, you'll notice yourself drifting off soon after dusk, then waking in the dead middle of the night, staring into the shadows and wondering if the creak outside was the wind or something far worse. That's the mood. The first frost isn't just weather, it's a psychological gauntlet. You feel the season closing in like a trap. You feel your body already bracing for the months of cold, hunger, and darkness ahead. And yet somehow, you square your shoulders, mutter something about surviving just like your parents did, and you keep moving. After all, if you don't, the frost wins, and nobody in the village wants to be the one who lost to the air. You duck into your home, though calling it a home might be generous. It's a squat timber frame stuffed with wattle and daub. Basically a medieval DIY project of sticks smeared with mud and dung, dried just enough to stand upright. You pull the door shut behind you, but the cold laughs its way through every crack and crevice. The wind finds you, sliding under the thatch, sneaking between the boards. No insulation, no double glazing, just walls that rattle like a loose tooth. You settle onto a stool that wobbles like it's had a few too many ales, and already you're wrapped in smoky air thick enough to sting your eyes. The interior is small. One room if you're poor, maybe two if you're rich enough to own an extra cow. The roof beams drip with soot, blackened by years of fires burning below. You crouch low to stay out of the worst smoke, but it doesn't help much. Your lungs feel like you've smoked a pack of medieval cigarettes, which, thankfully, don't exist. Yet. Still, people cough, and some never stop coughing. Modern historians argue whether the constant smoke indoors shortened lives dramatically, or whether, weirdly, it helped kill off certain bacteria. Either way, you're hacking like someone who's been dared to swallow pepper. At night, the drafts are merciless. You tuck straw around the base of the walls, shove rags into the gaps, and curse the wind as it whistles through anyway. The smell of damp straw mingles with the smoky air until the entire house feels like one big, earthy stew. If you've got a bed, it's a simple wooden frame stuffed with more straw, maybe a blanket if fortune smiled on you. More often, you're laying straight on the floor, closer to the dirt than to anything you'd call comfort. Medieval peasants weren't fussy. Comfort was a luxury. Survival was the goal. The quirky side? Some villagers swore that stuffing animal hair or even dried nettles into the walls could block the drafts better than mud alone. Imagine explaining to your neighbor that you're busy plucking goat fur for wall insulation. Not exactly HGTV material, but hey, you're not competing for style points. You're just trying not to freeze. The roof above you is thatched, bundles of straw layered thick to keep out rain. The theory works until it doesn't. A heavy frost means the thatch stiffens, then melts, then drips right into your living space. You might wake up to icy droplets falling onto your forehead. Your bedding damp before you've even warmed it with your body heat. And if you think about pests too much, well, you'll never sleep. Rats, lice, and fleas adore the cozy nooks of your drafty hut. One wrong move, and you're scratching all night, wondering which itch belongs to which species. Historians still argue whether peasants ever decorated these spaces to lift their spirits. Some sources say the poor occasionally whitewashed the walls or painted simple patterns to reflect light, while others believe that kind of flair was reserved for the wealthier households. What's certain is that you'd take anything to brighten the gloom. Even the faint glow of firelight on a whitewashed wall feels like a luxury in a world built from brown mud and gray smoke. And let's not ignore the smell. Imagine mixing wet dog, smoke, cabbage stew, and unwashed feet into a single candle. That's your home. You might grow nose blind to it after a while, but step outside into the icy air and you realize just how pungent your cozy little draft palace has become. And yet, it's still better than standing out in the frost all night. At least inside, the wind doesn't slice through your bones like a knife. The walls creak as the night deepens, every gust of wind turning your hut into a giant flute. You pull your cloak tighter, ears pricked for sounds beyond the rattling timbers. Was that a branch scraping the roof, or something worse? Fear thrives in these spaces. Every whistle of wind, every groan of wood feels like an omen. Your house doesn't shield you from nature so much as remind you of its presence. So here you sit, wrapped in smoke, coughing, surrounded by straw walls that whisper promises of collapse. And yet this is survival. Your ancestors did it, your neighbors do it, and tonight you'll do it too. You'd complain, sure, but then you realize you've got no alternatives. The drafts may sneak in, but so does a certain grim pride. You're inside, not outside. That counts as a win in this long freezing game. The fire is your anchor now. You crouch near the hearth, which isn't some grand stone fireplace. It's a shallow pit in the floor, or a crude clay structure against the wall. Flames lick the air, sputtering and snapping as wood, dung, or peat crumble into embers. The smoke swirls up and out, theoretically. In practice, much of it hangs stubbornly around your face, filling the room with a haze that makes your eyes water until you're blinking like you've just chopped 50 onions. The warmth is fickle. Sit too close and sparks leap onto your clothes, threatening to burn holes in your only tunic. Sit too far back, and you're shivering again, toes curling under themselves for any hint of heat. You shuffle closer, then back, then closer again, like some awkward medieval dance routine. Your family joins you, knees bumping, shoulders brushing, everyone competing for the prime spot, while the unlucky ones at the edge wonder if frostbite is nibbling at their toes already. Historians still argue whether most peasant homes had chimneys in this era, or whether smoke simply drifted out through a hole in the roof. The hole in the roof version is more likely for poorer folk, which means you're basically living inside a campfire with a ceiling. Your hair smells permanently of smoke, your clothes reek, and if anyone back in the future gave you a hug, they'd assume you just spent a week at a bonfire festival. The practical side. Fire is life. You cook over it. You dry damp clothes by it. You keep predators at bay with it. And sometimes you even use the embers to light neighbors' homes when their own fires die out. Matches don't exist, and flint isn't always handy, so losing your fire is a genuine crisis. If the flames sputter to nothing during the night, you might huddle in the dark until morning, praying you can coax sparks back before the frost wins. Imagine explaining to your neighbor that you let the family fire go out. They'll look at you like you've committed high treason. There's also the constant paranoia. Sparks. A stray ember can jump onto thatch, and suddenly your home is less drafty hut and more bonfire attraction. Quirky detail? Some villagers hung salted fish skins near the fire, not just to preserve food, but because they believed the smell of roasting skin helped ward off evil spirits hiding in the smoke. Nothing says cozy winter night like inhaling eau de smoked herring while you cough your lungs out. And still, you love the fire. Its glow is hypnotic, the crackle almost soothing if you ignore the choking haze. You warm your hands, turn them, warm your feet, then spin like a human rotisserie until you've thawed every frozen inch of yourself. Sparks dance upward, swirling into the rafters where soot gathers in thick blankets. Some historians think the soot might have acted as accidental insulation, making homes just a hair warmer. Or maybe that's wishful thinking. because it mostly makes you gag when it flakes down into your soup. When you're tired enough to leave the fire and crawl into bed, you carry its warmth in your skin for only a few minutes before the chill creeps back. That's the cruel part. The fire never spreads far. Heat doesn't fill the room. It hugs the hearth like a selfish dragon guarding treasure. Step away, and you're plunged back into winter's grip. That's why you and your family linger so long around it, faces orange in the glow, the rest of the room swallowed by darkness. The fire isn't just warmth. It's light, safety, community. Without it, the night is a black void waiting to swallow you whole. So you cough, your eyes sting, and your clothes smell like you've lived in a chimney. But you endure, because tonight the fire is the thin line between you and the frost that's already clawing at the... You tug at the coarse wool wrapped around your shoulders, and it scratches like sandpaper that someone left in a wet barn. Fashion isn't exactly the priority here. Survival is. Wool is your best friend in the medieval winter. Sheep are everywhere, and their wool is durable, heavy, and insulating even when damp. You might complain about the itch, but you'd complain a lot more if you were naked in the frost, so you learn to embrace the discomfort. Your tunic is rough spun, undyed, maybe brownish or grayish, a kind of potato chic. Forget runway models. Here, if you've got 2 tunics layered, you're basically royalty. Then there's fur. Not fancy mink or fox collars like nobles strut around in, but simple rabbit or sheepskin, stitched into awkward cloaks and mittens. You know the saying, a warm peasant is a happy peasant. Okay, no one said that, but they should have. The smell of fur, the way it still feels slightly animal, is both comforting and unsettling. Quirky detail? Some folks even lined shoes with scraps of old fur or straw to make a kind of medieval sock. It doesn't win style points, but it stops your toes from turning into little ice sculptures. Historians still argue whether layering was deliberate strategy or just necessity. Did peasants consciously think in terms of insulation, or did they simply throw on every rag they owned and call it good? Either way, you're standing here wearing so many mismatched layers you look like a human onion, and you're still shivering. Your cloak is clasped at the chest, heavy and stiff. If you're lucky, it's lined with scraps of linen. If you're unlucky, it's patched so many times it looks like a quilt that lost an argument with scissors. You pull the hood low over your ears, trying to keep the wind from whistling through your skull. And even with all of this, you feel the chill seeping in. Medieval cloth doesn't seal like modern waterproof gear. When snow melts on your shoulder, it soaks right through, leaving you damp and miserable. The village women spin and weave during the long nights, fingers nimble even in the cold. Wool yarn twists into coarse fabric, sometimes dyed with plants if you're lucky enough for a splash of color. Maybe a muddy red from madder root, or a dull green from nettles. Don't picture neon. Picture muted, earthy tones that look like they've already been through the laundry 100 times. Still, that drab green tunic is better than nothing when the frost tries to chew on your bones. And let's talk about footwear. Leather shoes, if you have them, are stiff and thin. They soak through easily, and once they're wet, your feet become little ice boxes. So you stuff straw inside, change it out often, because damp straw is worse than none at all. If you're too poor for proper shoes, you're wrapping rags around your feet, hoping they stay in place long enough to keep the frost at bay. It's not glamorous. Honestly, you'd give anything for a pair of fuzzy socks from the future, the kind with silly cartoon prints. Instead, you've got something that looks like a potato sack tied with string. The quirky little tricks matter. You might rub animal fat into cloth to make it more water resistant, or wear a hat even indoors, because heat escapes from your head isn't just modern nagging. It's painfully obvious when your ears are the first to go numb. A scrap of wool tied around your ears feels like heaven compared to frostbite's bite. At night, you don't undress. Forget bedtime pajamas. You climb into bed with all your layers still on, cloak wrapped tight, hood pulled low. You may itch, you may reek of smoke and sweat, but at least you're not shivering completely bare. That's how you sleep. A bundle of wool, fur, and questionable tailoring, trying to trick the winter into sparing you one more night. You shuffle toward the corner where your bed waits. A bundle of straw, maybe raised on a wooden frame if you're lucky, but often just a heap spread across the dirt floor. It crackles as you drop onto it, stiff stalks poking through the thin fabric like tiny knives. You sigh, not because it's comfortable, but because at least it's horizontal. And soon, the rest of your family piles in too. Privacy? That's not a concept here. Survival means bodies pressed together like sardines in a straw can. The warmth is instant. Human bodies are little furnaces, and when you stack enough of them together, you generate a pocket of heat. Your mother, father, siblings, maybe even a grandparent. Everyone squishes into one lumpy bed. You're squeezed between an elbow and someone's icy feet, but the shared heat makes it bearable. Quirky detail? Some households even tucked in a goat or a sheep at the edge of the bed, the animal's bulk acting as a medieval hot water bottle. Nothing says sweet dreams like a sheep's nose snuffling near your face. Historians still argue whether this communal sleeping was purely practical or also tied to social bonding. Was it only about warmth? Or did it reinforce the sense of family unity in a world where survival required tight cooperation? Whatever the reason, you're sandwiched in here, trying not to move too much, because every shuffle risks letting a sliver of icy air snake into the nest. The straw mattress itches, of course, and after a while it stinks too. Sweat, dirt, and animal hair mingle until the bedding is more alive than you'd like. You swap it out when you can, but in deep winter, fresh straw might be hard to find. By then, your bed feels less like a mattress and more like a compost pile in progress. Still, the weight of your family beside you reassures you. Together, you might just make it through the night. Alone, you'd be shivering until dawn, teeth rattling like dice in a cup. You wrap yourself tighter in your wool cloak, pulling it over your head like a makeshift cocoon. Beside you, someone snores loud enough to shake the rafters. Another sibling kicks in their sleep, and you mutter a curse under your breath, but you don't dare push them away. Every inch of shared contact is precious, and if you roll too far toward the edge, you'll feel the draft oozing through the cracks in the wall, stabbing into your side like an icy knife. There's an odd intimacy to this arrangement. You can hear every breath, every rustle, even the gurgle of someone's stomach. If someone whispers a prayer or a charm against evil spirits, the whole bed hears it. Sometimes you even share dreams, retelling them in the morning as though the night itself stitched your imaginations together. The bed isn't just a place to sleep, it's a fortress of warmth, a stage for whispered stories, and occasionally, yes, a battlefield when elbows and knees collide. The quirky little strategies show up here too. Some folks laid heated stones at the foot of the bed, wrapped in cloth to prevent burns, a primitive but effective way to keep toes from freezing. Others stuffed the bedding with dried herbs like lavender or mint, not just for the faint scent, but because people believed it repelled lice. Did it work? Maybe. But it probably made the compost pile smell a little less tragic. And so you drift off, cocooned in scratchy wool and the press of bodies, the straw creaking underneath, the fire's last glow fading across the room. It's not luxury, it's not even comfort, but it's survival. The bed becomes a living organism, breathing, snoring, twitching, sharing heat against the freezing night. You can't help but think, when warmth is this scarce, even your sibling's bony elbow feels like a blessing. Your stomach growls as the cold creeps in, because warmth doesn't just come from wool and fire. It comes from food. You shovel down whatever you can before crawling into bed, knowing your body will burn through it like a furnace in the night. Bread, dense and dark, fills most meals. It's coarse, heavy, sometimes flecked with bits of grit from the millstone. Each bite crunches faintly, like chewing sand, but it delivers calories, and calories are king. On better nights, you've got a pot of stew bubbling over the fire. It's thick with barley, turnips, maybe a scrap of salted pork if fortune smiles. The scent of onions mingling with smoke clings to the rafters, and the taste is both earthy and comforting. You gulp it down, not caring that it scalds your tongue. You need the heat inside your belly more than you need patience. And when the ale comes out, even weak and sour, you thank it silently. Water freezes, water fouls, but ale, low in alcohol, brewed thin, stays drinkable. It hydrates and warms, at least in your imagination. Historians still argue whether peasants got enough nutrition in winter or whether they constantly teetered on the edge of deficiency. Some records suggest diets were monotonous but steady. Others hint at long stretches of hunger when harvests failed. Either way, you know the truth in your bones. Food isn't just fuel, it's survival insurance. Tonight, you eat until your stomach feels pleasantly heavy, hoping the heat it generates will carry you through the bitter hours. The quirky side? People sometimes gnawed on roasted chestnuts or sipped broth thickened with blood, a thrifty way of squeezing calories from animals without killing them outright. Not exactly Instagram-worthy, but in the frost, practicality trumps presentation. A cup of blood pudding broth might just mean the difference between shivering awake all night and drifting off into a food-warmed slumber. Your breath clouds in front of you even indoors, so you hunch over your bowl, soaking in both warmth and calories. Eating is a family affair, everyone dipping from the same pot, slurping in unison. The fire flickers, smoke swirls, and the stew pot hisses like a cranky old neighbor. Your fingers thaw slightly as you clutch the wooden bowl, warmth seeping into your hands before the cold reclaims them. The bread fills the gaps, but it's the fat that really sticks with you. A bit of lard spread on bread, or a scrap of fatty meat tossed into the stew, sends your body into overdrive. You don't know the word calorie, but you know the feeling of heat spreading through your chest after eating something rich. It's why you lick the pot clean, scrape the last crumbs, and secretly wish for tomorrow's meals before tonight's is even digested. Of course, indulgence is rare. Some winters, food is rationed carefully, each meal thinner than the last. You remember neighbors who didn't make it through the hungry months, January through March, when supplies dwindled and the frost kept fields barren. You mutter a small prayer that this year the granary lasts. Historians debate whether villagers shared supplies freely or hoarded them, but you've seen both. The generous neighbor who brings a loaf, and the miser who guards his stores like gold. Survival makes saints of some and sinners of others. After supper, you feel drowsy, warmth spreading from the inside out. You burp softly, ignoring the laughter when it echoes across the smoky room. You lean back, savoring the heavy-lidded comfort of a full belly, and know that tonight's sleep will be better. Tomorrow might bring hunger again. But for now, you let the stew and bread and ale work their magic, turning your body into a small, determined furnace. And with that, you're ready to face another freezing night. You're drifting towards sleep when a familiar sound rumbles from the corner. A low moo, a shuffle of hooves against the dirt floor. That's right, the cows are in the house. In winter, animals aren't just livestock. They're central heating units with legs. You share your space with cows, goats, maybe a sheep or two, and a flock of chickens that act like alarm clocks gone haywire. The warmth they give off is real. Their bodies radiate heat, raising the room's temperature just enough to take the edge off the frost. Of course, warmth comes with aroma. The animals don't politely step outside for their business. They leave it right there steaming in the cold air, mixing with the smoke and damp straw, until the entire house smells like a barnyard stew. You wrinkle your nose, but you accept it. Better to stink a little than freeze a lot. Quirky detail. Some villagers swore that sleeping near chickens kept away nightmares, as though their clucks chased off evil spirits. Personally, you suspect the smell alone is terrifying enough to scare anything away. Historians still argue whether peasants deliberately invited animals indoors every winter, or whether it was a last resort in harsher climates. Archaeological digs suggest that many houses were indeed byres, half for people, half for beasts, under the same roof. It wasn't glamorous, but it was efficient. The animals were safer from wolves and thieves, and you were safer from frostbite. Symbiosis, medieval edition. You lie back in the straw, listening to the symphony of sounds. The creak of timbers, the crackle of dying embers, the occasional snort from a cow, the restless cluck of hens. A goat nudges at a wooden bucket, rattling it loud enough to make you grumble. But at least its breath warms the air slightly. When you pull your cloak tighter, you realize the room is several degrees warmer than the air outside. And that could be the difference between life and death. It's not all discomfort. There's a certain security in hearing the animals so close. The steady rhythm of a cow chewing cud, the gentle shifting of hooves, becomes almost like a lullaby. You know that if the beasts are calm, no danger prowls outside. If they panic, well, then you have a problem. Their instincts are your early warning system. Still, sharing space means sharing problems. Fleas hop freely, lice crawl, and in the worst cases, diseases jump from animals to humans. You scratch your neck absent-mindedly, wondering if that itch is just straw or something more sinister. You tell yourself not to think about it, but in the back of your mind you remember rumors of sickness spreading through whole villages, starting with a cough, a rash, or worse. And yet, when the frost howls outside, you're glad for their company. The animals don't complain, they don't gossip, and they don't kick you in their sleep like your siblings do. Their warmth is steady, dependable. As you drift toward sleep, you can almost imagine their presence as a blessing. Sacred warmth wrapped in hooves and feathers. You smile faintly, even as a chicken decides your straw bed looks like a perfectly acceptable perch. You sigh, roll over, and let the barnyard lull you into dreams. Morning comes, and you're groggy, stiff, and already cold. The fire died hours ago, leaving behind gray ash and a faint smell of smoke. Your breath fogs in the air as you peel yourself from the straw, every limb reluctant. Winter doesn't care if you're tired. You've got chores to do. You drag on your cloak, shuffle to the door, and brace yourself as the icy air slaps you in the face like an offended relative. First task, firewood. Always firewood. You tramp into the frosted woods, boots crunching on frozen ground, fingers already numb. The logs you drag home feel heavier than boulders, and the cords never seem enough. Whole families spend winter calculating every stick, every splinter, desperate not to run out before spring. Historians still argue whether peasants actually stored enough wood for entire seasons, or whether they constantly foraged week by week. Judging by your aching back, it feels like both. You return with your bundle, dump it by the hearth, and collapse onto a stool, panting. But there's no time to rest. The animals need feeding. You scoop frozen fodder, crack ice out of the water trough, and lead the beasts out long enough for them to stretch stiff legs. Your fingers burn as you break ice with a stick, splinters jabbing into your palm. You mutter curses under your breath, the kind you'd never say in church. Quirky fact? Some peasants kept fish ponds precisely so they could crack the ice and pull out carp during winter, like an early form of frozen food storage. Handy if you're rich enough for a pond. You've got turnips. By midday, your body feels half frozen and half exhausted. You trudge back inside, stomp snow from your shoes, and flop by the hearth. The warmth is fleeting, though. You've got spinning to do, mending to finish, maybe even patching the roof where frost loosened the thatch. Winter doesn't let you sit idle. If you do, the cold sneaks into your bones until you swear it's crawling in your marrow. Your family works alongside you. Children haul water, women spin wool by firelight, men chop wood or fix tools. Tasks blur together, everyone grumbling but pushing through. The smoke thickens again. Your eyes sting, and you cough until your chest aches. Still, you keep going. Fatigue is the winter's favorite weapon. It wears you down little by little, until even crawling into bed feels like dragging a boulder uphill. The rhythm becomes numbing. Wake in the dark, work in the gray, collapse back into dark. Daylight is stingy, and you measure time by the chores rather than the sun. You can't tell if it's Tuesday or Thursday. All you know is that your hands are raw, your body aches, and the nights stretch forever. Yet you endure. You joke with your family, maybe even sing as you chop wood, badly, but it breaks the silence. You grumble about goats eating the straw roof, Laugh at the chicken that insists on sitting in the cooking pot. And tease your sibling for slipping on ice outside the door. The humor is rough, sarcastic, sometimes desperate, but it keeps your spirits flickering like the fire. At the end of the day, you collapse back into the straw bed, body trembling from the cold and the work. Your fingers still ache, your breath still fogs, but the chores are done. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that, until spring finally loosens winter's grip. For now, you let the exhaustion drag you under, knowing that survival is less about strength and more about sheer, stubborn repetition. The night is long, and darkness presses against your little hut like a living thing. You lie awake, listening to the creak of timbers, the rustle of straw, and the faint breathing of family and animals. But in your mind, it's not just wind and wood you hear. It's spirits, witches, and things that creep when the world goes silent. Fear, like the cold, seeps into every corner. You mutter a prayer under your breath, words you've heard in church but half forgotten in the smoke and frost. Saints are busy, sure, but maybe one of them has time to keep watch over your bed tonight. A charm carved into the lintel of the door catches your eye. Maybe a cross, maybe a scratched symbol your grandmother swore would keep evil out. You don't fully believe it, but you also don't dare question it. In winter, when death feels close enough to knock on the door, every superstition has weight. Historians still argue whether peasants truly believed the night swarmed with demons, or if these tales were more a way of explaining everyday danger. Wolves howling in the distance? Easier to call them spirits than just hungry predators. The groan of frozen wood, maybe witches scratching at the walls. Whatever the truth, you don't need convincing. The fear feels real enough when the fire's glow dies and shadows crowd the corners. Quirky tidbit: some villagers kept dried herbs, rosemary, mugwort, or even garlic, tucked under pillows to ward off nightmares. Garlic under the pillow might not win you friends, but at least the demons supposedly kept their distance. And if it didn't work, well, at least your dreams smelled like dinner. You shift in the straw, pulling your cloak tighter. The cold gnaws at your toes, but it's not just the frost keeping you awake. You think of stories told around the fire, of women who flew with the devil, of men cursed to wander the woods as beasts, of restless souls who slipped into homes through keyholes. Children listen wide-eyed, adults chuckle nervously, but when night comes, the laughter fades. In a world without street lamps, without locks strong enough to keep out the unknown, imagination fills the dark with teeth. Sometimes the fear is practical. Thieves might creep into the village, stealing food or tools. Wolves or bears might test the edge of the byre, sniffing at the smell of livestock. A single misstep outside could mean freezing before you find your way back. The night itself is an enemy, stretching on and on, daring you to close your eyes. Still, you doze. You drift in and out, jerking awake when a log cracks in the hearth, or when a goat shifts too loudly. You whisper another prayer, spit 3 times to banish evil, your grandmother's trick, and eventually the fear blurs into dream. Sometimes you dream of spring fields, golden and warm. Other times you dream of shadows pressing in, faceless figures watching from the corners. You wake sweaty under the cloak, heart pounding, only to find your sibling's elbow digging into your ribs. A nightmare, yes, but also just another night. When morning finally comes, pale gray light filtering through the cracks, you're exhausted, but grateful. The spirits didn't take you. The wolves stayed away. The hut still stands. The night may belong to fear, but dawn still comes. And that's enough to keep you moving forward. Dawn scrapes across the frost, pale and reluctant, and you realize you've survived yet another night. Your body aches, your throat stings from smoke, and your feet are still cold despite all the layers. But you're alive. That in itself is victory. You stretch stiff limbs, kick stray straw from your cloak, and glance at your family stirring beside you. Survival isn't about thriving. It's about enduring. And somehow, you've done it again. The long nights pile up behind you like firewood. Some winters are harsher than others, some harvests thinner, some sicknesses crueler. But always the same stubborn rhythm carries you forward. Huddle by the fire, eat what you can, pile into the straw bed, wake to chores, and whisper prayers into the dark. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants lived in constant dread of winter or whether they simply accepted it as part of the yearly cycle. Looking around, you suspect it's both. You fear the frost, yes, but you also know spring has always come, even after the cruelest seasons. Quirky detail? On certain nights, villagers held gatherings filled with songs, riddles, and stories, partly to keep spirits high, partly because laughter seemed to trick the cold into loosening its grip. Imagine squeezing into a neighbor's smoky hut, ale in hand, singing off-key with 20 other voices until the rafters shake. For a moment, you forget the frost entirely, warmed instead by company and noise. And that's the secret, really. You survive not because you have thick walls or soft bedding, but because you cling to each other. Family, neighbors, animals, even half-believed charms, all become your shield. The frost may claw at your door, but inside, you've built a fortress of stubbornness, stories, and shared heat. You survive because you refuse not to. Spring will come. You repeat it to yourself on the coldest nights. when frost coats your lashes and your breath feels like smoke. Spring will come, fields will green, animals will graze, and sunlight will stretch long again. Until then, you pull your cloak tighter, shuffle closer to the fire, and steel yourself for another night in winter's grip. Because that's what peasants do. Endure, and endure, and endure. Now that we've stumbled together through the smoke, the straw, and the stubborn nights of a medieval winter, it's time to let the frost soften into something gentler. Picture the embers in the hearth, no longer crackling, but glowing quietly, a steady orange heartbeat in the dark. The animals have settled, their breathing slow and even, a rhythm that fills the hut with something calmer than silence. Your family's warmth presses in close, no longer a crush, but a steady reassurance. You are not alone. The wind still whispers through the thatch, but it sounds less like a threat now and more like a lullaby, a hushed song wrapping the house. The icy drafts that once stung your toes now seem distant, kept at bay by the cocoon of layers and the weight of drowsiness settling over you. Your body has worked hard, eaten what it could, and now it simply asks for rest. Let your eyes close. Let the darkness outside lose its sharp edges and melt into something softer. The wolves, the witches, the worries, they all fade with the dawn waiting just beyond the horizon. What remains is the steady warmth of breath, the faint rustle of straw, the glow of the last ember. And as you drift, imagine spring waiting for you, green fields unfolding, sunlight stretching, streams thawing into laughter, sweet dreams.